Well, currently driving around in snow. Something to do. Tired of sitting at the house. I've ate enough chili and drank enough coffee. Actually, I still got coffee, so that's a lie. Can't really drink too much coffee, can you? Especially if you're just a dumb trucker. So what are we talking about now? Here's a good one. I have actually lots of things to talk about. Let's talk about this. Let's do one subject. Housing. This gets talked about so much. At least once a day, one of my friends, usually younger friends, will post on Facebook saying, the American dream is dead. Cannot afford a house. Well, that's bullshit. Anyone can afford a house. Anyone can afford a house. You just don't want the house you can afford. Let's unpack that. According to the last time I heard anybody in the financial world, I don't want to say the real estate world because that might be different, but in the financial world, they say do not buy a house more than 4 times your annual gross income. Think about that for a second. What if you're making $50,000 a year? Your wife makes $20,000. Well, you're lower middle class. That's a pretty tough road to hoe right there. Do you really think you can afford a $280,000 house? A house over $250,000? I don't think so. But then you go into the real estate office, they set you up with a broker. The broker comes back and says, well, if you buy it on a traditional note, say 20 years, maybe even 30, yeah, you probably can't afford this house. It's too freaking much. But if you stretch it out to 50, well, yeah, it drops to $500 a month. What you don't do is sit down and calculate that all out and realize that you've paid for that home 3 times before you get to the end. So, the way I look at things is black and white. If you can't afford a $280,000 house, making a combined $70,000 income, you sure as hell can't afford to buy a house, that same house, 3 times over the course of paying it off on $70,000 income. Are people doing it? Yeah. Yeah. You want to know why housing's so expensive? Because people are doing it. I work in housing. I haul roof trusses. I haul floor trusses. I haul wall material for brand new houses. Every subdivision I go into, and I mean every one, starts out at a minimum of $300,000. And these are not swanky houses for sure. Not at all. But they're all in the city. They're all close to convenience. They're all close to schools. And so for that convenience, you pay through the nose to live 10 feet away from your neighbor. Most of the places I go into, just thinking off the top of my head, they all have a big old sign out front that says such and such, such and such real estate area, whatever. I'm just making up a name. Garden Hills Estates. Okay? Garden Hills Estates, where homes start out at $500,000 on up to $1.5 million. And they'll say this right on front. So you know, basically it's to tell you you can afford this and you can't afford this. How do you know you can afford it? Well, as the economists say, 4 times your annual income. So let's say you're looking at a $500,000 house. You're making $125,000 combined a year. Do you really think you can afford a $500,000 house? Making right at upper middle class? Oh yeah, by the way, did you know that? If you live in the Midwest, $125,000 puts you in the upper middle class as a household. That's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? I always thought upper middle class was like $250,000 and above. Well, it is in San Francisco, it is in LA, it is in New York, it is in Florida, but it ain't in the Midwest. Not here where we get snow like this, and everything sucks. That brings me to the other thing. If you're living in LA and you say, well, I can't afford housing, that's because you live in LA. Did you know that same job you have probably exists in the Midwest? Probably exists in Kansas City or St. Louis or somewhere around Cincinnati or somewhere around Dallas, Minneapolis. Well, yeah, but the weather sucks there. Certain parts of the year, yeah, it pretty much sucks. It's literally 2 degrees outside right now with a wind chill of 18 below. No joke. I'm riding around this Jeep, still got my freaking coat on, my hoodie on. I had my gloves on until I had to play with this phone. But housing, it's not that the housing market is ridiculous. Houses themselves are ridiculous. The house that you're saying that you can't afford is not your father's house. Your father's house was 900 square feet. Your father's house crammed you and your 2 siblings, or maybe 1 sibling and a dog, into it, and you guys don't remember how small it was because you guys were little. You go back and look at that house now, I guarantee you're going to say, wow, this was tiny. Because I've done it. I've gone back and looked at the house I lived in when I was a kid. The house is, I guess. And they were tiny. And so you got to think to yourself, well, this is all Dad could afford. All Mom and Dad could afford. But that's how they were able to afford it. They didn't go for that bougie house that you want, or that your wife wants, or whatever, or that you think you deserve. That's the other thing. Well, I work hard and I deserve this, I deserve that. No, you don't. Deserve ain't got nothing to do with anything. There is no reserve. There is no guarantee of happiness. There's only the right to pursue it. You're guaranteed the right to pursue happiness. You're not guaranteed happiness. You're not guaranteed a freaking house. Not everybody gets a mule and 40 acres, my dad used to say. You got to work for what you got. Yeah, there's government handouts. I know all about it. Don't get me started on that. But if you want something, you got to go get it. Okay? And you got to make sure that you're going to get what you can afford to get. If you're trying to buy a $500,000 house on $125,000 a year combined income with 2 kids and car payments, you're going to struggle. That is not how to live. Now, if I was giving that advice, the only thing I can compare it to is what I've done. My wife and I have never, not one time ever, bought a house, and we've bought 5. We've never bought a single house that was more than half of our yearly combined income. Let me say that again. Not more than half our combined income. And I'm talking about on years where maybe we only made $70,000 to combined. That means we were buying houses around $35,000 or less. Did you know you can do that? Did you know that you can buy a house for $35,000 in America? Yeah, it's true. It's in that town you've never heard of. It's that town with no stoplights. It's that town with not a school. They got to bus you to the next big town so you can go to school there. I grew up in those towns. Okay? I grew up in towns where the population was double digits. 57, 89. Maybe you hit 100 one year. If there was a whole rash of babies getting born. I don't know. But people grew up and left those towns too. They wanted something more. But it doesn't mean it ain't a good town to live in. I currently live by one of those towns. A town of less than 500 people. Now, it's actually a lake town, so some of the property is actually pretty expensive. But the property I bought 7 years ago, now of course this is 7 years ago numbers, but it was less than $25,000 for 5 acres. That's $5,000 an acre. Cable and trailer house on it, had water, utilities. I mean, everything was there. Didn't have to dig any lines, nothing. Now, we didn't want to live in a trailer house, but I'm not too good to live in a trailer house. I've lived in them before. And so that ends up being kind of the point. It's what you're willing to do. I bought something that, in my mind, I could afford. Now, I can tell you right now, we were making more than $70,000 when we bought this place. But let's just say we was making 100. I'm not going to say it's what we were making, but let's just say we were making 100. It means we could have bought a $400,000 home. My wife and I are on the same page. We would not have even entertained that house. We wouldn't have entertained a house half that much, not even twice our annual income. We've both had a pretty solid rule to stay under our income, and even more than that, if possible. because my dad was a carpenter. I grew up doing carpentry, so I know plumbing, electrical, a little bit of everything. Always look for the places that need a little bit of work. And usually a little bit of work means about half price. And that's no joke. You look for a house that needs work. Maybe it needs remediation. Maybe it had black mold. Maybe it has some flooding. Who knows? But you look for those kinds of houses, you can get those cheap. You see flippers on those TV shows where they flip houses. They buy these all the time. That's how they get them. They all need work. And the only way they're able to make money on them after capital gains is because they buy them super, super cheap. These houses are out there. And they're all in towns you've never heard of. So get out of the city. Go to the country. Look for a house you can afford. Housing is affordable. Anyone can buy a house. Anyone can afford a house. You just got to go after the house you can afford. Start today.